This is section 3.3. This is part 3. We have been calculating slopes using when we're given 2 points, and we have been using this formula right here. So continuing, I want to find the slope of the line that connects -8, 6 and -8, -1. Just label these x1, y1, or an x2, y2, in whatever order suits your fancy. Now plug in. My slope is equal to y2 minus y1, -1 minus 6. And this is over x2 minus x1, -8 minus -8. Okay, so some arithmetic. -1 minus 6 is the same as -1 plus -6. Some of you will be able to do this in your head by now. Others of you, keep writing out these steps until you feel really comfortable with them. -8 minus -8 is the same thing as -8 plus 8. This gives me a -7 in the top. This gives me a 0 in the bottom. Now remember, if you have a 0 somewhere in it, it's either going to be a horizontal line or it's going to be a vertical line. Your slope is either 0 or it's undefined. Under the line, it's undefined. Okay, if you were to plot these 2 points, you would see that they make a vertical line. Okay, and I have a typo here as well because I just repeated the same problem here. I know what it is I was trying to get here, so let's change this to 4, -7, and 6, -7. Okay, so let's call this x1, y1, and x2, y2. Using the same formula we have been using, my slope is equal to y2 minus y1, -7 minus a -7. Divided by x2 minus x1, 6 minus 4. Okay, so this would be -7 plus 7 over 2, which gives me 0 over 2. My slope is 0. So this would make a horizontal line. Okay, so let's continue here. This book does something that is pretty weird. It has you use a formula before they give you the formula. Technically, we don't get this formula until the next section, but I've taught from this textbook since 2000, gone through many editions of the book, and they have never corrected this. Okay, so a formula we don't have yet. It's called the slope-intercept form of a line. And the formula is y equals mx plus b. This is another formula that people tend to remember even if they don't remember what it was used for. Y and x are just part of the regular equation. If you think to the linear equations we've been dealing with, we said they could be written like this: ax plus by equal to c. This regular x and regular y are these two values right here. The important part of this formula is m and b. M is your slope. Okay, so the coefficient of your x value is always your slope. B is always the y-intercept. This part becomes very important in the next section. This is the part we're going to be using in this section. What this is saying is if I have just an equation given to me in any particular form, if I rearrange things and get y by itself, I should be able to look at the equation and find your slope. Now, if you're using a graphing calculator, you have to rearrange things into this format anyway. So this is what I mean by you'll be able to look at the formula and know your slope. And if you know your slope and you know the sign of your slope, you'll know whether your line should be going up or down, or should it be flat, or should it be straight up and down. And you can catch mistakes that way. Okay, so let's just try finding the slope of 3x minus 2y is equal to 3. What I want to do is I want to rearrange it so that it is in this format, which means that I need to get y by itself. And that means I want to get this 3x, that whole thing, over on this side. This was a positive 3, so I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. That leaves me with negative 2y on the left. And these are not like terms, so I'm not allowed to combine them. Now, just as a quick statement, I could write this as 3 minus 3x. That's perfectly legitimate. It just doesn't match this order, and so it makes it a little bit harder to use the formula. So really, the only reason I'm going to write it as negative 3x plus 3 is just so that the order matches the formula. Okay, now I'm almost done. I want y by itself, and I still have this negative 2. Now imagine that we just had negative 3 over here. What we would do is divide by negative 2 to get rid of it. Well, that's still what we're going to do. When you need to, divide this by a negative 2. And you have things over here that you're not allowed to combine. What we get to do is just divide each of these by a negative 2 as well. Okay? Negative 2 divided by negative 2 goes away. So this is y equal to. Now simplify each of these fractions. Negative 3 divided by negative 2. Well, 3 over 2 is in lowest terms, but we have a double negative. So 2 negatives divided is a positive. We think sometimes about those canceling out. So what I have here is 3 halves x. Negative 3 divided by negative 2, that's going to be a negative number. So we would normally just change that. You can write it as plus a negative 3 halves, or your better answer is to change it back to a subtraction and get minus 3 halves. Okay, remember, mathematicians are lazy. If we can get away without writing something, we do. Okay, so now we have this matching this pattern. All we have to do now is look at this to figure out where our slope is. Our slope is always the coefficient of x. Here is my coefficient of x. So my slope is 3 halves. Note, your slope is not equal to 3 halves x. Okay? The x does not belong. This is one of the most common mistakes. Okay? Another thing is we leave it as 3 halves even though it's an improper fraction. Remember, we need the comparison. You do not change this to 1.5. You do not change this to 1.5. You just need to make sure it's in lowest terms.